Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Early in the Trump administration, the Department of Government Efficiency directed the General Services Administration to take major cuts to leased office space. GSA officials say they successfully terminated hundreds of leases this year, but far fewer than the goals set by DOGE. These updated figures come at a time when government officials are taking stock of DOGE's impact and whether agencies came close to achieving the Trump administration's government efficiency goals. Federal News Network's Jory Heckman is here with more details. Jory, thanks for being here.
Hey, Terry. Great to be here.
So just back up for a minute. We have talked about federal real estate quite a bit. Why is that a top priority for the Trump administration?
There's a couple of ways to look at that. I think the most recent one is that in the president's management agenda, the Trump administration has made optimizing the federal real estate portfolio one of its top priorities. As far as the why of it all, the Government Accountability Office has made this a part of its high-risk list of programs that are of concern government-wide. This is because there is a growing backlog of maintenance repair requests that the General Services Administration is unable to keep up with. It's a multi-billion-dollar backlog, and it's only growing. So it's at a time when more and more federal employees are being asked to work in the office full time. They are acutely aware of some of those deficiencies, and they are none too happy about it.
So how close is GSA saying they actually got to DOGE's goals to downsize leases?
Right. So early this year, DOGE urged the General Services Administration to be really aggressive with these lease terminations. We were talking somewhere in the neighborhood of 900 plus lease terminations that GSA at one point was embarking on. And pretty soon after, there was a realization that GSA sent too many of these out. By March, it was rescinding hundreds of those lease terminations because tenant agencies were not aware that they were being kicked out of the space. They weren't aware it was going to impact public-facing services. So there was immediately a walk back, but now we have a little bit of a understanding to what the final numbers look like here. At this point in the year, it looks like the General Services Administration successfully canceled 260 lease terminations, saving about $112 million in annual costs. But that's the numerator. And if you look at the denominator, that's roughly about 30% of the lease terminations that DOGE inspired GSA to carry out in the entirety of this year. So it's a small fraction overall of what the goals were, but there were successfully some terminations, and there's more to go as far as shrinking the federal property portfolio. We heard from Andrew Heller recently at a congressional hearing. He's GSA's acting public building service commissioner. He told members of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee that the agency disposed of 90 owned properties in fiscal 2025, eliminating about 3 million square feet of office space from the government's portfolio. And there are another 45 properties added to GSA's list for accelerated disposal, but GSA hasn't updated that list since May.
Jory, just clarify for us the kind of buildings that are leased versus the kind of buildings that are owned.
Yeah, so typically when you think of owned buildings, you think of some of the statue-esque properties within D.C., the Treasury Building headquarters, the headquarters of a lot of agencies. Those are owned buildings, the idea being that these are buildings that they're going to be around for a long time, and that there's no plans to move people around and move them into different space, or typically buildings where there's a good understanding that there's a set number of employees that will be working in that space for the foreseeable future. Leased office space is a little more fluid. These are spaces that the Government Accountability that the General Services Administration signs every couple of years. Every couple of years, those leases are up for renewal or for termination. And so it is a shorter term solution. But of course, rates can go up as time goes on. Those leases can be more costly. And there was a time back in previous administrations where the focus of right-sizing the federal portfolio overall focused on canceling leases because it was the easiest thing to shrink in the short term.
And so as GSA has updated their reports on how far they've progressed in this task, Have you heard anything from Capitol Hill? Are lawmakers interested in these numbers?
They are. So lawmakers on a bipartisan basis, members of this public buildings subcommittee of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, they did give credit where credit's due. They commended GSA for being able to reduce this amount of office space in a relatively short period of time. This is a long-standing issue that goes across multiple administrations. However, some of the Democratic lawmakers pointed out that this is very little to show for some of the chaos around DOGE more broadly. DOGE, in addition to cutting federal real estate, also was adamant on cutting the federal workforce. And some said that that happened at GSA more quickly than the ability to shrink the federal buildings portfolio. GSA overall saw nearly half of its employees leave or get reductions in force this year. And, at the cuts at PBS more specifically were such that GSA did ask hundreds of those employees to come back after they received RIF notices, understanding that they cut too deeply.
Is GSA continuing to move forward on reducing unutilized or underutilized office space?
They certainly are, perhaps maybe not with the same momentum and enthusiasm that we saw earlier this year, but this is always going to be an issue on GSA's radar. One thing that is certainly going to be happening next year is that the Trump administration is going to be looking at more opportunities to shrink underutilized office space through the Use It Act. This is a piece of legislation that President Joe Biden signed before leaving office in January. This really does set this government-wide target of a 60% utilization rate for federal buildings. And if those buildings come up short, then those agencies need to come up with a plan for reducing that office space. That means relocating to smaller space, co-locating other agencies into that space, but generally doing what they can to get those utilization numbers up. And also in January, GSA and the Office of Management and Budget are going to submit plans to consolidate agency headquarters in the national capital area to meet that 60% target. And it's worth pointing out that the Trump administration has already used that 60% benchmark as a justification for moving the Department of Housing and Urban Development out of its headquarters and moving them into what used to be the headquarters for the National Science Foundation in Alexandria.
So there will continue to be some moves we can expect in the foreseeable future. What does that mean the state of the federal building portfolio looks like today? Despite
all of these lease cancellations, the push to do that, GSA is more broadly trying to shift more of its portfolio away from owned buildings and into leased office space because the maintenance backlog for GSA owned buildings is growing considerably. One member of the Public Buildings Reform Board, which advises GSA on underutilized properties it should sell, they told lawmakers that at this point it would need about $50 billion to address the backlog of deferred maintenance and repairs in buildings. And GAO has also come up with some numbers here saying that the backlog has more than doubled in recent years. This is the kind of issue that if you don't address right away, the problems just compound, they get more worse, the repairs become more costly. And GSA is on board here. They are asking Congress for $365 million for an optimization fund in fiscal 2026 that would help them dispose of more underperforming buildings.
Well, the public building system certainly has their hands full.
Absolutely.
That's Federal News Network's Jory Heckman. Jory, thanks for the update.
Thanks, Terry.
You can find his full story at federalnewsnetwork.com. Threats facing public servants. This is the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network.